Um, Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the November Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting. I'd like to call us to order. We're still waiting for one to join us, perhaps, maybe two. Let's see, Corey very kindly, as usual, sent out the agenda, first of all, and the minutes, so we can go through those things. Has anybody had a chance to look at the agenda? Do you have any comments, or would you like to move to adopt it?
Move to adopt it.
Here, one, do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of going forward with the agenda as noted, indicate your assent. That looks like, thank you. Any opposed? I'll give you that chance. I don't think so, though. And how about for the meeting minutes? Any comments on those or a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
Great, thank you. Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of adopting the minutes as Corey has prepared them, indicate so. Okay, that looks like 4 in favor. Any opposed? Okay, those are approved. Thank you, Corey. Good minutes again. On to our business. We'll start with our consultant Amber, who's here for the Lakefront project overview. I'll just hand it over to you.
Great, thanks. So good to see everyone this evening. So I've just got an update on where we're at with our project. I'm going to go ahead and share. Go ahead and share our presentation. I am, full honesty, not an everyday Zoom user. We are a Teams company, so let me figure this out real quick here. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see the toolbar in front of it or no?
Nope.
Okay, great. Super. Okay. So here we are today in our project phase 2. So this is the second phase of the work. We completed phase 1, which ran basically July 2023 to July 2024. Phase 2 includes more detailed design, building on the planning and diagramming and programming exercises that we did through all of phase 1. And so phase 2 was authorized in 2 sections, basically section 1 being the first part of 2024, or the second part of 2024, and then the remainder of the work through the year of 2025. And then really into the beginning of 2026, but 2025 will be the kind of the meat of our project. So right now we've got 2 active phases of work going on. We've got our early works demolition project. So this is sort of a part 1B of the project. And then we've got, of course, the phase 2 work, which right now we're in the design development phase. So skipping forward. So our progress report for early works demolition. So these are 2 separate projects for a really specific reason. Essentially, the city, purchased this property for the Lakefront Park improvements, and the condition of that grant was that several of the structures that were purchased with the RCO dollars would be demolished. So these were a number of the old cabins that were on the site. This was a condition of the grant. So regardless of when or what it looked like for the future park project, it was inevitability because of the terms of the grant, these structures would need to come down. And so outside of the design work that we've been doing, the city has been working with the Recreation and Conservation Office, RCO, to complete this demolition work, which allows the city access to a $270,000 grant piece that was available to demolish these buildings to bring the city to compliance with the grant. So the city applied for an extension on that one time already. The new expiration date for those funds was November 30th, 2024, so 4 days from now. And we have been working through this early works process to make sure that we completed and satisfied those grant terms on time so that the city would not lose out on the ability to get reimbursed for that $270,000. So we are in construction for this work now. We're just about completed. So the work that has happened since the last time that I met with the Parks and Rec Board is that we've completed a selective site demolition and hazardous materials abatement. So as you guys know, these structures are fairly old, more than 50 years. We did do hazardous materials testing. They had things like lead paint and asbestos tile, asbestos in the insulation as well. So that has all been cleaned up. These cabins, although kind of a little bit derelict, needing of some care, they contain viable, great quality old building materials, things like old growth woods, brick that can be reused. So as part of this work and as part of the city's commitment to do the best by way of ecosystem and reuse these materials as we can, this project, in addition to the abatement and the demolition, also included salvaging of a lot of those useful materials. So there was a part one salvage of kind of piecing out what we could see as the structures started to come down after the old siding and lead paint was abated. That exposed more good wood on the interior. So those things have been taken and palletized. And so that material, that process has been completed. Once they're kind of pieced out with all that usable material, the structures themselves have come down and only the foundations remain. So the salvaged material is stockpiled on site. A lot of that you can see just from within the fence. And then the rest of it is on pallets and stored inside cabin 7, mostly, which is the old garage, and cabin 6. So the structures that came down are structures 1, 2, 3, and 4 that were on kind of the north east side of the structure of the property. Cabin 5, which was the cabin that was right close to the corner of the preserve and Beach Drive. Cabin 6 remains. Cabin 7, which is the garage, is remaining standing. Cabin 8, which is the big house, that is also standing. And then cabin 9 is the little lakefront shelter. That one has also been taken down. So I see we have a question from Josh.
Hi, yeah, just curious, are you, I assume that you're like documenting this as you go.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it'd be a good idea to include updates now that action is actually happening on the property, either newsletters or social media or other things.
Oh, so interesting. So we have not been posting this on social media, but I think that's actually a great idea. So we have been, we've been coordinating with Corey on the updates to this project. There have definitely been questions about the work happening from, residents on Beach Drive. I know that the mayor has spoken with a couple neighbors, and then there was some communication early on with the Civic Club that this would be happening. Corey, do you want to speak to any other updates on social media, things like that? And we can, even though this is kind of a separate, because of our permitting strategy of wanting to build within the footprint of these old structures, but also not having figured out their design, they are sort of separate. So we have not published anything about, the Lakefront Park has started with selective site demolition simply because we are not permitted for that project yet. We are permitted to demo the structures, but we're not permitted to build anything in their place. So we haven't kind of linked the two in that way in the public's eye.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sort of permitting reasons, I see the distinction. I suspect for the average resident of the town, it may not be a distinction. It may be more sort of, yeah, this is step 1 or step 0.5 in something that will take years and years yet to complete, but there is movement forward, and I think that's worth celebrating in some way.
Great.
Yeah, we can talk, I'll talk to Lori and Mark about that. We do want to be careful with the neighbors and the Beach Drive of bringing attention to the area, but I think doing an update of where we are and moving into the year, we could do something.
I think it's just a matter of how we word it. I think we can do that and could still communicate, that there are developments, but there's still so much more to come.
Yeah, it just makes it real. It's not groundbreaking. It's not the official groundbreaking of anything, but
Right.
it is sort of conceptually action. And that's always better than inaction in its way. So and I would think that if people are curious, having those photos out there or something just would discourage looky-loos, discourage from people from feeling like they need to go and look at something or hassle city council members or the mayor or anybody else about what all is going on there.
You know, and I think actually the city has been very intentional about the material salvage with the intent to reuse that in the new park. You know, keeping what was in good shape of the park. Unfortunately, we couldn't keep all of the structures. There were reasons for that, lead paint, etc. If Corey, if you think it's appropriate, we could work on a little bit of a kind of a press relief, just a little bit of a brief that talked about some of those key points about the reason that those structures came down, that the city is salvaging that old material and that the old material will be used. This was definitely something that we've reiterated in our engagement with the public, but there hasn't been a formal announcement. The last bit of the work that is remaining right now in the early works project is the fence. So there is a permanent, but a very sturdy, it'll be an in-ground chain link fence that will be installed with a, you know, privacy wrap around the park. So that will secure the site. So I agree with not wanting to attract attention to the park, especially before that's in place. Right now, there is a temporary fence panel with privacy fabric on it, but that will be, you know, a more robust in-ground fence system by the middle of December, essentially. So that might be a good time, as you mentioned, Corey, end of the year, to put out an announcement to talk about, you know, what's going on the property, if anybody has any questions. So Corey has coordinated with our grant manager at RCO and has verified that our grant obligations have been satisfied. So we have met successfully that deadline of end of November this year to qualify for those funds, which is excellent. So that's very good news. And then, as I mentioned, the final work items to be completed on the early works project are the fencing, and that fencing will be installed. It's the fence posts, it sounds like, will be installed potentially as early as Friday, and then more of the fence work will happen next week, which will be great. So at that point, we'll have a nice, robust, sturdy fence in case anybody does want to pop by.
Corey can correct me if I'm wrong, but I learned that if your fence is 6 feet tall, it's a fence, but if it's 8 feet tall, it's a structure.
Oh.
So
Yeah, so we do have a building permit for the
have a structure in place.
Yeah, so we do have a building permit for the fence that will be installed, and Mark has been working to make sure that that complies with all the local regulations, so we should be in good shape there. But yes, it's interesting the way that the code applies to fences. Okay. All right, so here's some photographs. So these are from a little bit earlier in the project. You can tell sort of by the weather when these were taken. This image here, if you can see the pointer, this one shows the carport still standing. That has since been taken down. There's also the corner of each of these buildings, which is actually where the power supply came into the buildings. These were kind of demolished with the meter still hanging on the wall until SCL came and disconnected those. So these are now all flat and secured as just a flat platform that is the former foundation of each of the structures. So cabin 9, this is the lakefront shelter. This shows sort of that in-between piece of after it's been abated, and then the crew had gotten in to do the selective salvage to look for any old growth wood in the within the walls. Wasn't much to save on this structure aside from the brick, but we got a lot of good material from the others. So you can see here, this is some of the brick that's been palletized and stacked. There's also a substantial amount of wood that has been cleaned and stacked in the garage, and then more wood that was actually taken off-site for the cleaning, where they've got a better machine to pull nails and all of that. That's going to be wrapped up and then returned and secured in an inside storage area on the property. So we do expect that this work is going to close out in December of 2024. And then at that time, oh, go ahead.
Amber, I think the picture of the cleaned up brick and telling people what it is, that's kind of impressive on the recycling side of things. So I've used that definitely because I didn't know what it was, and that's a lot of brick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it is so much brick.
Yeah, maybe when they move the wood back too, we could take some better pictures of the material we did save on site, because it's more than I thought.
It's quite a bit. Yeah, this is a lot of brick here, and we have a lot more brick than is shown in this picture. Basically, you know, from what was visible in the buildings, And what we got from the early kind of batch testing for the hazmat, we thought that we would be able to keep a lot less brick than once they did the detailed testing of where the asbestos mortar was on the property. We actually were able to keep much more brick than we had anticipated. So they, put on pallets and cleaned and wrapped as much brick as they had estimated in their scope. There were about 4 other piles of loose brick on the property that we will use for the landscape, and we'll use them for, other building construction when the new park comes. But this is not all of it. There's actually quite a bit left, which is exciting. So it'll give us the ability to integrate that through a lot of the site, which is nice because it keeps that relationship between how the architecture will look elsewhere and then how it looks on the main house. And so that should be lovely.
And with the wood, if that process isn't done, I could definitely see like either photo or video of the salvage process. You were talking about, getting nails out, getting other things, getting that ready and in place. I could see that similarly sort of showing what might be on the property
Why don't
and how
we
the
ask,
legacy is being preserved.
yeah, why don't we ask our consultant for the contractor who's doing the construction, because they have a lot of this wood back at their warehouse now. We can ask them if they have, a 30-second short or a couple photos that they could take of the process of it being cleaned. And then we will have a good idea of what the quantity of this material is, which I think will be some nice kind of infographic material, that we could include in an update to people to say, we salvaged 2 tons of brick and however much pallets of old wood.
We'll say the first group that did the reuse to go resell, they did a really cool like TikTok video of it, so I'll send that out as well.
Great.
Cool.
Okay. So our current contractor that's out there, as mentioned, they'll be finishing up the fence install early December, and then they've got a truck remaining on the site. They'll bring that other material back, and then this stage of work will be completed, and we don't anticipate contractors on site until we're getting more into the construction of the park. So one thing that may occur is there's a lot of good vegetation here that is in nice shape, but not located in its sort of long-term place, based on the park development. And so we will be doing some tagging of vegetation that's suitable for transplant, and then working with Corey, either with the city crew or potentially with a small works contractor between now and when the park construction happens, to potentially move some of that so that when the park opens, it will have some nice robust screening along the property lines especially, and we'll be saving that vegetation so that it won't be thrown out when the later contractor comes in and does the site clearing.
Is any of that vegetation work something that volunteers could help with, or is that, I know that there's safety issues on the site, so maybe not, but.
That's a good question. I think that's definitely a good idea for thinking later on in the project. And I think there's some areas, particularly things like invasive plant removal in some areas of the preserve where we have some, really large colonizations of things like ivy that we can have volunteer assistance to pull. There's ivy, there's holly and things like that. But there are definitely some safety concerns, that the foundations are there. They're pretty safe and clean, but you definitely don't want people, jumping on the old subflooring of 1920s era cabins.
Sure.
Especially since they're exposed to the weather right now. But I think volunteer labor, especially for some of that native planting on the preserve side or the invasive removal on the preserve side, I think is a great idea.
And I just know that there are native plant folks around town who I'm sure would love to be able to be part of that, and the more that we build those connections throughout the process, hopefully the smoother everything is.
Yeah, and those community efforts, as long as we have a way of documenting the volunteer hours, that counts as an in-kind grant for the city's required matching to its
Right.
Grant programs as well. So a community planting event closer to park construction could be a great idea. So we wouldn't want to do any invasive removal or native plant installation now until that is accepted as part of our means of mitigating for some of the other park development. So we would want to hold off until that has been submitted and approved, And then, once they've said, okay, in exchange for planting this much and removing this much of what shouldn't be planted there, you can have your permits, and then
Right.
we can go ahead and do that work.
Makes sense.
Okay. Okay. So for our progress report outside of early work, so again, that's separate. So back to the park design. So since we presented the schematic design to the city council, so this was based on, again, that sort of really rigorous year of making sure that we got to a preferred concept so that we could make our RCO applications in February of 2024, then finishing up that concept into a schematic design that allowed us to do a detailed pricing exercise. And that was presented to the Parks and Rec Board and recommended by the Parks and Rec Board for approval by the City Council. City Council saw that and accepted it. So we have been moving that forward into design drawings. So these are design drawings that are sufficient for permit applications and for basically that first stage of design progress. So basically taking the colorful illustration that we had at the end of the last phase, and then getting that into CAD design so that we can actually think about things like not just the area of pavement, but what is the depth of that section start to look like. So getting really into the construction details. So a component of that was to get the geotechnical investigation done. So this is the geotechnical investigation includes both just a couple of short-term borings. So these are vertical sections that are taken out of the earth that tells us, what information we need to know for things like structural footings for the dock and for the, structures that are still there. We'll need to renovate those to current seismic code. So there's information that we need there. The geotechnical process also includes, in place of 2 of those wells, installing a groundwater monitoring well. So that groundwater monitoring well stays in place for 1 year, and we do actually collect a year of data on it. So by doing that, we're able to see where the groundwater is located on the property and how it fluctuates through the year. And that information will help us to plan for things like stormwater compliance, if we can use permeable pavements. Permeable pavements, we're thinking, are probably not feasible here because of where we're already seeing the groundwater, and that groundwater is coming up higher as we're getting into the well, it typically comes up higher. In this location, it's going down a little bit simply because of the lake level, but we would anticipate if it were a natural system that it was coming up quite a bit higher. So anyway, so here we are, that's going on. We do have the draft report for the geotechnical findings. The on-site assessments have been completed. Those wells are in place. The groundwater monitoring wells are in place. The report has been submitted to the city. And using that information, we were able to complete our structure plans for things like the footings and supports that'll support the dock. We have also completed our pre-application meeting with the city. So this is where we basically sit down with the city and we say, this is the design that we're looking at. We are starting the formal local permitting process now. The city provides us with feedback based on how the code will be applied, what permits will be necessary, and what standards through the city's current regulatory devices will be held to. So it's critical information that helps us to complete that permit application for the state and federal permitting. So that pre-application meeting occurred on November 6th. And so we have been taking that information and moving that forward into our permit applications, which are nearly complete. So we also have completed workshop 3. So this is the 3rd workshop for the project, but it is the first of 2 workshops that will be in this phase 2, just so you know. And then our 50% design review package. So this is the drawings that will go off for permit, will also be submitted to the city for the city's review. And then that information will be rolled into our 70% design. So our state and federal permitting. So we had anticipated some fluff in the schedule around this time, needing to make those permit applications basically by, early October to late November time, so that we are basically into permit prior to the start of the winter work window, so that hopefully we can target construction work as early as next work window this time next year. So that aligns with our basically when the bid documents will be due. So when we'll be putting out a call to contractors to start to build them, the goal would be targeting that work window that is a January to February window. which would be timed with the beginning of potential construction in water. Okay, so summary of our workshop. So our workshop included a representation of the schematic design. So this was the presentation that we shared with the Parks and Rec Board before. We've shared it with the City Council before. It's been published online, but we've never had the opportunity to actually present it to the public directly and have their comments. So I do have, Corey, the boards, and I can share those here if anybody would like to have me flip through them. If I'm going through the recap and anybody has any questions about the images that were actually presented, let me know and I can flip the screen over to that. Okay, so our workshop 3, we had about 50 attendees in person, including the city staff and representatives that were there. This was a hybrid format meeting, so it was offered in person at City Hall, you know, at a weekday evening time, as has been successful with the past meetings on this project. And then it also had an online component of where you were able to view all the exhibits and then leave feedback through an online survey. In the room, there were QR codes around, and we were also collecting the public's feedback through that survey. So we had 77 survey responses. So that's a pretty good response rate. Not as good as the 400 people that we had on the prior survey. But the prior survey, we had a lot of people who were not sure what was happening, lots of good questions. And so we did expect probably for this was information that for anybody who is really engaged in the project, they may have seen these exhibits online already. But for, you know, others who wanted to come and see them or see them online, I'm hoping that we got some good, I think we got pretty good attendance in terms of getting 77 responses back. Okay, so our goals for the workshop were to present the design renderings. We also shared some interpretive themes. So this included the 2 themes that came out of the earlier interpretive planning session, but then also the 3rd theme that we developed after the last meeting with the Parks and Rec Board. So that was really the theme that was about the recreational and leisure history of Lake Forest Park and of this property specifically. And that actually ended up being a very resonant theme with the community members. So that was pretty exciting. Okay, and then we wanted to gather community feedback on all of this. So we had the survey basically in 2 sections. So about the schematic renderings and then about the interpretive themes. So the schematic renderings, we had 9 questions that were visioning questions. So those included things like, you know, after viewing all of the exhibits and the presentation of renderings for the schematic design, what comes to mind? How does this make you feel? Does this align with your values? So those types of questions. So generally, the feedback was really positive, and we measure this based on a net positive versus basically net mentions, and we score each comment as positive or negative. So for example, in going through the whole array of feedback, if we hear someone say it's just the right amount of parking, that's a neutral comment. If we that's a positive comment. If we have someone say, I have concerns about parking, that's neutral. If someone says this is not enough parking, it's a negative comment. So we tally those to say, okay, well, we have more negative mentions about parking. Maybe we need to reevaluate our approach to parking in the 70% design. Or we might need to share more information about why the parking was handled the way that it was, because people have questions about parking. So we go through this net positive, net negative mentions and come up with a score for those things. So that helps us stay objective after reading through all the comments to actually say these were positive comments. So we have a lot of positive comments, but also the math after doing that analysis indicates that generally people are supportive of the project. So we did have some concerns, and those most common concerns expressed were about parking and cost. So many were questions about parking. This looks great. I'm glad we didn't waste a lot of space to parking, but I'm worried that it's not going to be enough in the long run. So those types of comments. So you could hear in people's comments that there was a little bit of wrestling with the same things that we talked about when the Parks and Rec Board was making the decision about how much parking to include. The community did have some great recommendations. So these are all things that we will, you know, keep track of for the 70%. So we'll be moving into 70% design after the permit applications are submitted. So this will be basically December and January, we'll be officially moving the team into 70%. So those recommendations included things like planting, a lot of great feedback on types of plants that they might like to see, or the planting concept or design. We also heard things about the design of the picnic shelter. So the picnic shelter, you know, was one potential representation in the schematic design, and then we're iterating the design forward. We are anticipating having sort of an architecture and design focused meeting with the city again to look at some of the representation of those designs to make sure that we've got the city's approval on the design direction. Still in the similar vein, you know, of what was showed before. It is still an open air picnic shelter, but there's been some design tweaks based on what we heard from community members at this milestone and at the last. And then we did have some comments that surprised us. So there were a surprising number of comments of people talking about the size of the park and the number of buildings that are still remaining. So we heard a lot of people say, you know, it's going to be dense with a lot of structures. So these are pulled from some of the comments. I always wondered why there wasn't a public park in this location. Interesting, pretty neutral comment. Too many building structures for such a small space. So interesting. So there were definitely decisions before about what to keep, what not to keep. We knew that the grant required certain structures to come down, but there was the decision before about, do we keep cabin 6? Do we not keep cabin 6? Cabin 5 was also a question about that. How many of these should be kept and could they be moved if that was possible? And it seems like while there's a lot of people supporting the direction of the park, there are also individuals who are a little bit concerned about the structures that are remaining taking up too much space. Having been on site last week when all of the structures except the ones that are going to remain are down, even standing on Beach Drive and looking at the front of the park, it feels a lot more open. So I do think that this is going to be an interesting journey for what the community is used to seeing with everything standing. This transition period of where they're starting to see how more landscape is open now that some of those structures are down. And I think that some of that messaging, Josh, that you mentioned about, you know, the park starting to take shape, not a groundbreaking, but kind of clearing the way for the vision that the community has been working on. I think some of that is really going to help change the perception of what this will be based on the change in terms of what it was and even what it is today. So, Corey, did you share the full map of comments, full document?
No.
Okay. So it would be interesting, you know, we're gonna, I think those will go online. Is that right, Corey?
Yeah.
Okay.
So or I'll just.
Great.
So Amber, it's kind of interesting because in the first round, in the first workshop, we had a substantial group of people saying, keep all the buildings. And so it feels like, you know, we're hearing from a different group actually, so good. I think we have pared the structures down. And it probably does look more open with little cabins gone over there on the side, so. But I just think it's funny that we have all that, keep everything, people, and now we have, wait, it's small.
It really does. It's really opened up there.
I bet, yeah.
It's cool to see.
I wouldn't wanna lose the main building, right, so,
Mhm.
and then the,
Public bathroom.
and then the public bathrooms, and then. You know, the little office that might be almost a security office or something, or occasionally a security office, so. And then the picnic shelter, which people seem supportive of, so. There isn't that much, it is a small park, it is, yeah.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
I think it's combined also with the preserve.
Yeah.
It will have a definitely more spacious feel.
Yeah, and I think we were just talking about this last week when we were looking at, you know, the new sort of frontage. Now that, you know, cabin 5, the cabin that was right up next to Beach Drive, was very imposing and it really separated the two lots. With that gone, you know, you can feel the front of a park. You can look at it from end to end. You can see with the carport gone, you know, you've got the fence that stretches all the way to that side. And then the fence sort of connects with, you know, the front parking area that's on the preserve. And so you can really see the whole, you know, front facade of what will be the park. And you can start to imagine just the distance between those front trees that are going to be in the island. You know, as far back now as cabin 6 is located, that'll stay in its current place and you'll have, you know, the entry sequence there. And it is interesting, you know, walking into the preserve, when you're on that trail, you know, you can just turn left and you can see what is exactly where it's the back of the garage, but it will be one of the fronts of the bathroom building. So you'll have the 2 doors for the restroom there. it really is very central in terms of what the whole park will open up to be. So the bones of the park are really starting to take shape, and it's interesting because you can see how much of what's currently there is going to be reused in almost the same place in the eventual park design. So it's neat to see it coming forward in these stages, but I think, you know, I'm really immersed in where things were and where they're going to be. So anything that's helpful, you know, if we get into May when we have the next public meeting, if we want to do something that's a little bit more on site, or we want to have, you know, a series of exhibits that's like, you know, this is where the new this is going to be, this is where the new this is going to be, and stage those, you know, in the preserve, or take some photos of the current preserve and compare those back to renderings. We can absolutely do that if we think that that's going to help the community to see that vision and answer some of these questions that they have. Okay, so some of the main takeaways. The comments were generally positive and constructive. So a lot of people that came with a concern also offered an idea, which is great. We love when that happens. And then we had a point and counterpoint represented on most issues. So here's some selections of the comments. And when you read through the whole comment log, you'll see some of this. So, you know, some great things. Looks like this will be the heart and soul of our community. Love that comment. What strong language there. We had things like, there should be more beach and open space, less tree cover. I encourage you to retain as many trees as possible. Cut more trees down. So these are verbatim kind of comments. And this was the same thing on parking. We heard a lot of people say, this isn't going to be enough parking for how many people are going to want to visit this great park. And then we had other people say, have you considered not having any parking? So, you know, again, both sides of the coin, which, because we have this, you know, the analysis that says it's more positive than not, but we've also got comments on both sides. I really feel like we've hit a sweet spot for this design, where there are a lot of people who are very happy. And then there are a lot of people who understand why the concessions that had to be made were made. And so in that way, it does feel like we are where we should be in terms of a realistic approach that's in scale with what's possible on this site. And I think that's hard to do, but I think that we're there. Go ahead, Josh.
And in terms of the tree cover, we're basically, we couldn't remove any of the trees that are in the plan right now. Am I basically right about that? I mean, they're large, historic, you know, landmark kind of trees.
Well, so there is a process to remove trees. If the tree is a danger, or if the tree is in an area where you can mitigate for its removal, you generally can. But we went really out of our way to remove very, very few of them. And many of them are even things where we would say, you know, there's like 4 trees together and they're too close for long-term health of these. So we want to thin them out by 1, knowing that we may actually get to year 5 post-construction, then suggest taking another one out at that time for the health of the trees, but not so that it looks like a completely denuded landscape when the park construction happens, if that makes sense. So there will be, you know, a vegetation management plan for this park, essentially. We could take out more, but we haven't gone there. And then we are planting more because we think that's a good thing, especially in the preserve. Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking with the comment about the structures, and I think this may also apply to the trees, is that I think looking at a map, it can be hard to get a sense of scale. And with the main house remaining, if you haven't walked around it already, it's a little bit hard to picture. You know, if you're picturing that as a sort of average home in the community, it may make the space feel smaller than it really is when you walk around it. And similarly, there's some very large trees there. So you look at the map and you see that large tree canopy. It may sort of shrink the space if you don't have some reference point for it. And I don't know if there's a way in future renderings to emphasize the scale differently, you know, just to help people relate to it in that way. But I wonder if that may have been part of what was triggering those responses, just that people not really understand. I mean, there is a lot of open lawn space, other things for sort of beach style recreation, right? It's those of us who've played with the space in our minds have seen that, but if you're encountering it for the first time, it might not jump out.
Yes, and we did hear things about the lawn too, to that same effect of like, could we have more lawn, or this is a lot of lawn. You know, so again, it was one of those things where you are looking at a space that you may not have visited, represented in images only, represented from aerial photographs, which we use a lot, but which we never actually, you know, experience landscapes from the top down necessarily. So even what, you know, Corey and I, having visited the site a lot, every time one of those structures come down, it starts to look a little bit different.
Sure.
You know, you start to really kind of see the scale and dimension of things. And I am glad that the city and the design team were, you know, forward thinking about restraint in terms of the degree of change to this landscape. So doing things like keeping trees, keeping the lawn where it is, it will mean that this landscape will feel established much sooner than a park if we had said take everything down to zero and then let's start planting and building on top of that. So the goal would be that, you know, only a few years post-construction, this is a park that feels like it's been there for a decade. That would be, you know, success in terms of allowing the city to really have something, rather than saying you waited 3 years for it, now just wait another 3 and it's going to look, you know, even better, sort of thing. So again, I think in our renderings, we did include like a current view, and then there's the view of, you know, what the future view will be. And so we have tried to represent in the renderings where a tree is a real tree and where it's going to stay. But I do think that those images maybe are a little bit small. We could probably put together a slideshow that shows them more equal size, and you would actually be able to see which trees are remaining and not, which I think would probably be helpful. Okay, so the next part of that workshop was related to interpretation. So we had 4 questions in the survey on interpretation, and those themes were about ecological reconciliation and resilience. So there have been a lot of change to this shoreline, many of the shorelines around Lake Washington, and many communities and groups are interested in, you know, positive change to sort of bring back some of those ecosystems that were compromised during, you know, times and decades when we were less focused on such things. So, you know, we have a big focus on salmon conservation now. We did not realize what our actions were doing prior, and so we're acting the right way. So essentially, this was that first theme. Second theme is about natural systems and understanding and building connection to the environment. And then the third is really a historical connection about connection to the lakeshore through leisure and recreation specifically, and the long history of that kind of tells the story of this place. So we did have the community preferred, the respondents to the survey and the attendees at the meeting preferred the statement on recreation and leisure history. So this is really something pretty neat about this property. This property for a long time was a place for people to come and recreate and stay on the shoreline. It was in private ownership, and that experience, once the cabins were not being rented out like that, was kind of related to a small group or related to just the private owners of the property. Now the city is wanting to invite the community back onto that property, and that's a neat thing to hear, that the community wants to celebrate in the overall messaging and timeline of how we would share the history of this property. So there also was interest in the natural system restoration theme, so some great thinking there, and that's definitely been a commitment that we've heard from community members, from city representatives, from the council, is about the need for natural systems restoration as a component of this work. And then we also heard a lot of comments about acknowledging the Indigenous connection and history to this property. And so as we're moving forward and developing interpretation for this site, these will be some of the 3 primary messages, and then we'll build stories out of those concepts. So typically our design process includes, in this 50% design, us saying where we think interpretation may go. The actual design of those content and exhibits comes closer to the 70%, and then the 90% as well. So as we move this design forward, the Parks and Rec board will be able to see some draft content and draft stories and narratives, and actually how those exhibits would be presented on the site as part of the design process as the design continues. So our next steps, I'll be speaking for council on the 12th. So that'll be our first council presentation for this part of the project. Corey did inform me that the city budget was approved, it sounds like, and so the design team is authorized to proceed with our 2025 work. So we will be continuing to refine and advance the design into the 70%. So again, this will use everything that we've heard from the pre-application meeting with the city, from the additional information that we got from the geotechnical report, and from our additional engagement with the community members and then city representatives as the design process continues. Once we're at 70% and we have the 70% plans completed, we'll go through a formal pricing exercise again. So that means that those plans will be sent to an outside consultant who will view them as a contractor or a builder would view them and put together a price estimate. So we'll see what the price impacts of some of the design changes are. Now, we have always, when we've looked at pricing, we have looked at this as a whole project cost, which includes a lot of money that the city has already spent. So that includes site analysis, it includes the demolition work that's already happened. So that kind of sticker price that we'll get will include all of those costs, but we need to keep track of those things because everything that the city has already spent counts as matching funds for grants that the city will receive and is currently targeting. So we'll be advancing the interpretive design, as I just mentioned, local permitting. So this is the other layer of permitting beyond the state and federal permitting that we're applying for this month. We'll be in a sort of continued, building permits and land use permits. That's all through the local city. And then we'll do workshop 4 in late spring, early summer. So currently we're targeting a May-ish date for that. And then of course we'll continue the fundraising support. So Corey is really coordinating with different groups on getting funding or identifying eligible programs that we should apply for. And then we're continuing to support her in that effort. And then we are looking at completing the design plans by the end of 2025. So the goal would be funding is in place, that we are able to advertise those bids in basically January 1 of 2026 to get a builder online to start construction of the project. Okay, so that is the update for today. I'm happy to share those exhibits from the public meeting if anybody wants to see those, and then those are also online as well. Any comments or feedback?
That was great. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Any other questions or comments from the group? I thought that was really interesting. It's really good to see it moving. I really like that. And then hearing about the community feedback was really, what's the right word for it? Reminiscent of our own meetings. What I was thinking. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that discussion. Thank you so much. When do you think we will expect to hear back from you? Have we thought through that? When do we get to get another update?
We have those in the schedule.
First quarter
Okay.
of the year.
That sounds about right. Okay,
Yeah, I think we had a quarterly meeting target on this one.
Okay. Perfect.
We had our next Parks and Rec Board meeting on February 25th.
Okay. Great. Okay, thank you so much. It's kind of exciting. Even though it's cold and dark and wet outside, kind of want to go hang out in the park. So
Great.
the next thing on our agenda is the Horizon View Garden Tour Art Installation Update. Are you kicking that one off or am I?
We can vote.
Okay, there we go.
Well, thank
I'm
you,
gonna pop
Amber.
off. Thank you guys.
Okay.
Have a great
Bye,
holiday.
good to see you.
Good to see you. I don't do,
No, please.
so
What's the
Tyler,
context? Yeah.
yeah, so the garden tour, I think Ross Berg came to us. That was last
been a while,
year,
yeah.
maybe, it's been a while, but the garden tour wants to do an art installation project up at Horizon View, so she put together a group of 5 or 6, people, the Shore Arts, the Third Place Commons, art crew, Tyler is on the board.
With deep art experience.
Well, same here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they got about like 10 submissions and we're whittling it down to interview 3. We've interviewed 2 people. And then we'll decide if we want to ask 1 or 2 people to do some sort of exhibit or example, and then we'll. So
It's gonna be a permanent art installation.
Reprising
Art. Cool. Are they local or is it a national call?
It was,
Puget Sound areas, which,
Yeah.
but in the request, I think they got somebody who's far away, well. We're interviewing someone from Spokane also. Which in the grand scheme of things is in the area, and she's done work over here. Also somebody from. The Olympia area. And where was?
yeah,
she from?
she's like Anna.
Yeah, that's right, North Bellingham. So, yeah, in the area, there were a few from within Lake Forest Park. The three we chose to interview they had a lot of really good stuff. It was, I'm not an art kind of guy, but it was really inspiring, I would say, particularly as I think about this new park we have. We'll have a lot of space.
Yeah, they
Wow.
Tyler and I were like, oh, this would be great.
Yeah, there were some great ideas. I mean, these were not proposals for specific things. These were, it was mostly their prior work that we looked at, to try to get an idea of their approach and their style. But we did not ask them to spend any time and effort to create a proposal for us, because that's work. And if we do ask for that, we will probably find a way to pay them something for it, because it is effort. But the more we pay out for that part of the work, the less we have to pay out for the actual work. So Braz is doing a good job of kind of trying to get us to a point where we get really good bids that try to meet our needs. But our needs are kind of vague right now, I would say. So it's really good to get their thoughts and the inspiration for when they visit the park, what they want, what they have in mind.
It's been fun. I think we'll do many more of these.
Yeah, I hope so. It was great that it was the park, sorry, it was the garden tour that raised the money, right? So that was fantastic. And found a good park for it. I like that it ended up, they chose Horizon View to kind of get it away from sort of the central part of Lake Forest Park where all of our art is otherwise. Kind of get a little farther into the community, which is pretty cool. And there are other parks that have that potential. So if you have any money that you want to donate, feel free.
Am I remembering right that this was money that had they'd been sitting on and wanting to spend since like 2020, and that it got held up by pandemic related things? Was that the sort of the history here?
That's accurate, yes.
And so they're still saving some, because it sounds like they'd also like to contribute to the lakefront. We'll see.
Huzzah.
So we have one more interview next Friday, right? The 6th. We had a couple earlier this week. And I think we'll probably make some sort of decision that following week. It might be a finalist, or it might be for a couple of them, as you mentioned. And the goal is to get it installed in 2025. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Any questions or comments on that? Anything further? Next on the agenda is the 2025 work plan.
Yeah, I meant to send the 2024 out and I forgot, but just wanted to get it on everyone's radar for do some updating at our next meeting and the council beginning of the year. But
Yeah, when do we usually do that? First by March?
Very flexible, but by March, usually you tell us what you've done for the previous
Right.
year at a high level. And take any questions and then present your proposed work plan, and then, the council usually doesn't make very many comments or suggestions or adds just color commentary on some of the items that might not be fleshed out that much, and it's a fun time for everyone. Especially what a busy year you guys have had, unbelievable.
There's a lot
So,
going on.
yeah, you have a lot to be proud of, and I'm not sure every day that every council member is aware of it, so it's really good to bring that to their attention, because you guys are all volunteers, it's pretty awesome. So we're very lucky, so.
All right, so we'll pull that together for early next year.
I'll send
keep-
it out.
yeah, keep it-
for our next meeting.
I think, yeah, our last draft is a good one to start from.
Yeah,
Right,
think
it's
it's
probably,
probably
pretty
pretty
similar.
similar, but.
yeah. Next on the list, unless anybody, sorry, any questions or comments about that agenda item, the work plan? Okay, December meeting. It's next on the agenda.
We'll leave it up to you guys, we can,
What's the date that it's scheduled?
it's Christmas week, and I'm gonna say.
That's not gonna work very well. Just-
Yeah, we can either move it up, or we can cancel December and. Come back in January, if we were to meet in December, Celia from Third Place Common, I mean, depending on the date we choose. Said she would try to join our meeting, to get that connection going. I don't know how busy your guys' December is. Whatever.
Checking our calendars now.
I feel like that's something that would be a nice thing to do in January. Start off with relationship building in the new year. I feel like anything that happens in the mid-December gets lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, oh, yeah, because I'm gonna say the last week of December is no good for me. That means the second to last week is also no good, because that's the Christmas week, so it's then ends up being like the 17th. Which is just a teeny bit more than 2 weeks from now, so it's like,
Yeah.
well,
No, I was
Is that
just
worth it?
thinking, maybe we cancel and pick it back up.
unless there's something urgent, which it doesn't sound like there is. Does anybody else have any comments on that? One way or the other?
I think January would be better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any objections?
Yeah, I think the only reason to do something earlier is if we wanted to try to plan something in the winter, but I don't think there's anything like that on the. We did talk about the cabbage walk, but
Yeah, yeah,
Josh wants to be Cabbage King.
oh, yeah.
Maybe 2025.
I think, yeah, we'll
Let's put that on the.
process that and then get to that next year.
It could be a like Valentine's Day event, you know? Valentine's Day kale walk.
There you go.
Was there a specific time of year these happen?
Josh is the expert.
Was it-
I don't remember for sure. I think it's usually around the new year, but I think
okay.
we can create our own tradition.
When does the cabbage ripen?
Yeah.
I mean, January sounds kind of fun. I don't know.
And another is, we're good with this day of the month still for 2025, Tuesdays? Fourth Tuesday. I think it's always for us, so.
Oh, yeah.
So a reminder, you all did review the parks and trails parts of the comprehensive plan, so we're having our public hearing. On the comprehensive plan, the council's been through like, I don't know. A number of presentations, but also about 6 or 7 actual working sessions going through page by page. So the council's made some revisions, not much to speak of in parks and trails. So this is the final step before final revisions and adoption. So we have to get it done by December 31st, so we're getting down to the wire here. So usually we don't meet the last 2 weeks in December.
Yeah,
So we're looking to adopt it December 12th, I think, so with whatever
That's pretty
revisions
soon.
come out of the public comment stage, so.
any other updates? I think that's in our other category. No. All right, that wraps it up then. So we'll meet in January, sorry, to go back to that one. Or we'll not meet in December, we'll meet in January instead. 4th Tuesday for the rest of the year, unless we need to change it. And if you notice a conflict on your own calendar, give us, or in particular Corey, some heads up, we can accommodate. Or if you look at the calendar and find that it's on a, well, the fourth Tuesday isn't usually a big holiday day, but if there's something going on, school holidays is one that comes to my mind.
Good for
We're
fun.
good for a while, okay. Does April get weird?
Yep, that's
Okay,
great.
so we might need to move the one in April for school spring breaks, just it's a little complicated, travel plans and such. But that's all the way in April. We'll talk about that early next year.
Yes, sun.
Yeah. Anything's possible.
Or at least some.
I think I saw it today. No.
You never know.
All right, so with that, I think we're done with the meat of the meeting. We do have public in the room. If there are any public comments, or I don't know if anybody's online. Okay, so it's just you, Max?
Mostly just wanted to kind of come down and see how it's going. I saw that he was gonna be here. Wanted to see that.
Do you want to give a little introduction of yourself?
Oh, I'm Max Peter, Lake Forest Park resident and here-ish,
Okay.
ex-park board member.
Nice to see you again.
So, yeah, thought I'd come down and check things out. See how it's going.
Did you have a chance to go to the workshop or anything?
I did.
Okay.
I voiced my concerns through the channels there.
Okay.
See how it goes. I'm a little disappointed in some of the design, but I'm kind of wondering as to like how much she's. Is it designed to be a park or is it designed to meet all these requirements? How is it being designed? It's like when you put yourself there, it doesn't flow right. The design that they produced.
Okay.
If it's gonna be a swimming park, there should be a shower or a splat, or maybe a splash pad. It's like they think that through. The water's really gross. You want to wash off when you get out. Was that? I didn't see that addressed. I didn't see any part.
There is an outdoor shower.
There will be. That's great. I didn't see any bicycle racks in their design. The dead ends and the trails was what really got me. They want to eliminate the circle around the creek in the park, the reserve side, which creates a dead end at the end, a dead end at the entrance, a dead end at the dock that's over the water. You put one person there, it's a dead zone. Nobody else is going to want to go there. Whereas with the flow of it now, you can sit and relax, you can keep going, and you can just keep moving. There's a dead end there. The dock is nothing but a dead end, dead ends on it. To have a nice big open lawn play space, that's great. I thought that was a really good design there, but that stopped the flow and right.
Okay.
And the definition between is it the preserve or is it a park? Is it gonna be one unit or is it going to be quiet and peaceful reflective area of a preserve and the activity of a park? Or is it all gonna be one? I'm not sure what the design or where they're going with it. I couldn't quite figure that out.
Okay. No, I think that's excellent feedback, right? We're early enough in the process that it's like, give us the feedback. That's
Yeah.
great. We can start thinking about those things. And I think the flow within the park is really important to think about. How are people going to actually use it, right?
When you're there,
Yeah.
park your bike, get off your bike, because it's too small of a space to ride your bike through. Try to ride your bike down the lake.
Yeah, that shouldn't work very well. Hopefully, I think we're gonna make that.
Too many people.
Uh,
So,
Cool.
like I said, I was able to talk with them. I made my comments to her
good.
as well,
Good.
to the staff that was there. It got washed out.
I mean, in my experience, she's been very good at taking all those comments. Yeah, so I thank you for making them. They're really important.
Thanks for asking at the time, and I'm not really, you guys probably want to go home, but I had some notes if you don't mind.
Sure.
So as far as like that, I did, and then while I was listening to her, like the solid materials, is that actually cost effective? Is it just, it would have been better just put it all in a dumpster and go and buy new rather than
Yeah,
processing
it would be cheaper to bulldoze it down, but we're doing environmentally.
I mean, I know we've got grants and all that, it's not coming out of the taxpayers nickel, but. Still to do it with efficiently and cost effectively, it seems like kind of like that would be kind of important. So I mentioned the dead ends, that really, it's a flow, just keep us moving.
Mhm.
It's a destination park, we're gonna go there, but once we're there, we wanna keep moving. We don't wanna go and sit at the little dock over the creek. The division of the parks, park versus the preserve. Again, it would be really nice if there was vision between the two. This is your active park. Go play, go crazy. Give you exercise equipment or jungle gyms or whatever. But over here, you know, kids should be more quiet, enjoy, watch the fish, learn about the fish and nature, different environment. And then the structure, the building, obviously they like it. City
The
council
main
may like it, the fact that it can be utilized as active space. Sounds good, but the cost in the long term, maintenance, vandalism, upkeep, is it a historic building now? It's probably not, It'd be easy to get rid of. And again, like she said, the space and the property, I was like, do you really want that? That has a long-term cost to the, you know, taxpayer. Graffiti, vandalism, monitoring, police, et cetera, the extra. All that, outdoor shower and splash pad, I mentioned that, bike racks.
Yeah, bike racks are definitely important in the design work, you know, in the use of the park. There was a lot of discussion with the design committee and this group about access to the trail. How it works. I think we can't deal with a lot of that, the details of that right now, because the trail is King County Park, right? So they actually deal with some of the routing, but there were some good thoughts about
That's
how
gonna
to
be an interesting one
how to connect the trail with the park a little more and make it easier to get a bike down there.
You're gonna be bringing in a lot more people because of the access to the trail, that's something that has to be thought of. And I hope that, I'm sure that it has.
The walkway now, which is so limited to get to the preserve. Is gonna be improved and be a more state of the art standardized sidewalk walkway. So that at least will be improved compared to what it is right now.
Yeah.
Just like a little dirt path. So.
I imagine there was a gentleman at the meeting as well, he's very concerned about the intersection, the high traffic and all that, and I was kind of like, the park is the least of your concerns on that, wait for South Transit to come through, do their business. So again, that's something I'm hoping they're thinking about, I have no answers on that. It's gonna be entertaining, 'cause you're going to have that flow.
We have rough plans on to improve that crossing
Yeah.
for, not just for the park, but in general, longer term plans wherever we can, you know, hijack some money. Maybe with our new traffic camera revenues, we can, because it's, you know, it's a state highway, so we have to partner with WashDOT, but that's a possibility. I did want to say a few things about money. I don't know, it hasn't been publicized that much, but recently council member Rod Dembowski has, from King County Council, he often looks out for us in terms of contributions. He helped us with the original purchase. He's helped our senior center when they were short of funds. He recently was able to earmark some money to Third Place Commons for events and programming. Well, he recently has discovered $500,000 to go to implementation of the park plan. So that's a good chunk of additional money. Yeah, it doesn't fill our whole estimated gap right now, but that's like, wow, how wonderful is that? So, you know, I think we could call it the Dembowski Park. He comes up with a little more funding. And also, we're still in the running. Congresswoman Jayapal has put an earmark in her budget for 2 or 2.5 million, 2.5 million. And it's specifically for the main building, because that is community space and we have no community space of our own that the city owns. So the fact that that would provide a community space, that's the pocket of money that we're going for. The park itself was not as appealing. I was back in DC with some other council members and, you know, what resonated was the community space, so.
That is
we-
popular.
Yeah, so we have stayed in her funding request and it's good because she has never actually had an earmark for Lake Forest Park before. So it's good, we're deserving, is the way I put it. So we hope that that will stay. It's stayed through a few rounds. I haven't heard the latest update from our federal, you know, representatives about where that stands, but
Is that money gonna keep it going, keep it up and maintenance?
no, that would be money to do the restoration of the building.
To get it
So the
built?
maintenance, we're gonna have to figure out, because yes, there will be maintenance. And I think there's security and maintenance issues both, so that's why Little Building 6 is good, because we have tight space for our officers right now, and so, you know, an officer might wanna just sit there and do their paperwork. And meanwhile, keep an eye on things, on a busy summer day, you know.
I was thinking artist in residence, but that's
Well,
not really a city.
it's
No, it's not bad,
flexible.
too. Yeah.
It's a flexible space right now. We haven't made a decision, just, you know, we want, and maybe the answer is with, you know, other security techniques, it will be an artist in residence, who knows? It's a good idea.
It is a cost thing, it does take
Uh-huh.
up space, and
Yeah,
being a small place, it is going to be popular with the residents as well as the people who's
Yeah.
wandering on the trail. It does take up space. Throwing that out.
anyway, good news.
Everybody's aware of that already.
Yeah. So we're trying to get a lot done with that park.
Yeah.
We have the 500,000 in hand, we hope for the 2.5 million.
Yeah. And,
Thanks, Max. Appreciate it. Oh, sorry, you have it on your list. I didn't realize.
I wanted to ask, I was also gonna say, I've been into the geocache adventure lab. Has anybody heard of that?
Nope.
It's like geocaching, but it's a new version of, and what they do is they take you to like 5 to 10 different locations. And it can be anything from down a street to over an entire city. And I've been doing quite a few of them actually, as of recent, and I was kind of wondering.
Are they like organized events? Is that what you mean? Or what is it?
It's an app, it's not an app.
Okay, okay.
And it's through the app, it takes you to a specific place and then it asks you some question. To prove you're there, you enter it in, you get a little ding and it kind of vibrates, the phone vibrates, et cetera, and get a little congratulations at the end. And I was kind of thinking about designing one up for Lake Forest Park with the idea of the parks.
Yeah.
You know, visit the parks at Lake Forest Park. I was kind of thinking about doing it myself. I was kind of wondering if it was something I would throw out to you guys and see if it was something, if anybody had some experience with or knowledge of that might know more about how to build it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to build it.
Exactly.
But apparently like a regular person can. But the really good ones that are built in conjunction with geocache headquarters over in Ballard. So
It sounds like a fun way if you connect it.
Yeah.
The parks, you know, kind of, a step beyond the walking trail, or walking routes kind
Yeah.
of thing, yeah.
Well, Max has been a big fan of that. I'm
Yeah.
to speak for you.
Oh, yeah, it's true, it's
Higher
true.
top on
Yeah,
the board.
I wasn't aware of that kind of thing, and
Yeah,
that
never mind. It's
does
a good
sound
idea.
really fun. We need to find like a young expert.
Something that's a little more, I'm not technologically, I'm capable of figuring out what other
Way to go.
build.
Yeah.
And like,
Turn
again,
off, turn on.
they're great, they're in all the different kind, all over the place, and they can be over an entire city, they can be down the street. But
What was that one called again?
it's called the Adventure Lab.
Okay.
And it's an app and it's a subset through geocaching. Like I say, to put it together and again, to bring everybody through the city. And get get not just citizens, but why not citizens?
Oh, sure.
To explore more of our great parks and city that we have.
Cool. I'll take a look at that. I mean, we're always looking for ways to like get people out in the parks and especially get them to know the parks that they might not be right next to their house. So that's a good one. I'll take a look. I don't know. If
I feel
can-
like geocaching was something we had. I don't know that we spent much time on it, but I think it was a topic of discussion at some point, maybe a year ago,
It does sound familiar. I don't think it went anywhere.
worth revisiting. Yeah.
Well, this is next level.
Okay.
Geocaching, it's under that guise of using your phone, going and finding the spot. But a lot of the geocaches that I've done, because I've done quite a few of those adventure labs, this type of project. Through the process, you can really write like a paragraph, you can give a lot of information as to something interesting or historic, say, our general that's in Fitz and Lakers there, you know, you can have a little write-up about him. Of course, there's a reader board there for that. You get, I'm trying to paint a picture for you. It's pretty robust.
Okay. That'd be a good park promo kind of thing.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. Thanks for your comments. Appreciate it. Any other comments? Nobody's online, you said? Okay. All right. Well, where were we? Oh, that's the last one. Hearing any other business we didn't get to? All right, I think that's it. With that, I'll adjourn our meeting and we will see you in January. Have a happy
Happy
Thanksgiving.
holidays, everyone.
Oh, all the
Happy
holidays.
Thanksgiving.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Great meeting.
Happy New Year to you.
Yeah.
Right?